What's up? How's it going? I'm in another new studio because I just moved into a new condo in Bangkok, which is where I live now. Don't know how that happened. But anyway, one of the most common questions photographers get is, which camera do you use? And usually I will send those people an article on my website listing all of my gear, but I haven't updated that article in at least a year. So it's way out of date because I got a bunch of new cameras recently. So I figured, why don't I just make a video talking about which cameras I own, which cameras I use, and also the lenses and the accessories and what I think about them. Now, if you are new to photography and you want to take photos that resemble my photos, if that is how you found this video, I'm afraid to say that just buying the same camera is not going to do the trick. But if you like the kind of cinematic, dark style of street photography, I do recommend checking out a couple of videos on this channel. And if you're new to this channel, consider subscribing if you like those as well. I'm talking about how to make cinematic looking photos or Blade Runner style photos, and a couple of editing tutorials can be found on this channel. So anyway, let's get to the video. My main setup has always been the Sony, or not always. I started with Olympus, but my favorite camera, and if I only had to have one camera, would be in the Sony Alpha series. I used to shoot Sony A7 for the longest time, but I broke it in the rain. A second Sony that I've broken in the rain. They are mostly weather sealed, but the screen on the back of the camera is not. I've found that out enough times now to realize that is the case. And it's not even easy to fix. So unfortunately, I have this half-dead Sony A7 III still somewhere in my parents' place in Finland. But I replaced that one with the Sony A7S III, which is a great camera for video. It's not a stills camera though. It is the best video camera I've ever owned. It's one of the best you can get for the money, but it comes with the compromise of stills. So I used to shoot everything with the Sony. Now with the 12 megapixel stills means that I have to be very careful about cropping, and I cannot really get very high resolution photos at all. It's still fine for like social media stuff, but it makes me rethink whether or not I'm going for a video shoot or a still shoot. If I'm going for a still shoot, I'm likely to bring one of my other cameras. I do kind of miss the A7 III's still photo capability, so I've been thinking about maybe I'll either get even a more expensive Sony by getting the Sony A1 that recently came out that has both the video and the stills features, but it costs like 5,000 USD. Or I would just get a second Sony body for stills like the A7R, 3 or 4 or whatever. And for the Sony I have a couple of different lenses. I do not like to use zoom lenses. I started out with zooms just like any other photographer, but I much prefer primes. One of the reasons is that they are more compact, usually cheaper for what you get, and usually better for that one focal length. The only downside obviously is that you cannot zoom, but I find just using one focal length per shoot, or at max 2 focal lengths per shoot, I find it easier to kind of get into the zone when I know exactly which composition I have in my head without having to think about different focal lengths. So it's almost like simpler is better in a way. I just never really felt the need to have zooms. I know a lot of people like zooms. I don't. And the lenses I have, my favorite 55mm, I bought it at first. Most of my street photos are taken with that one. All the other lenses are just for fun, to spice things up. If I only had to have one camera, it would be Sony A7 III with 55. But I also have 35 2.8, really small, gets the job done kind of lens, 24mm f1.4 for wide angle videos, and an 85mm f1.8 that I don't like much. But it's my longest lens. I used to have 70-200. I still have it, but I just left it behind in my parents' place, and it's really hard to access that now in this current situation, so I basically don't have it. And I don't know how much use I would get out of that lens. It's a bit awkward in street photography since it's massive. I just kind of got it at one point to kind of spice things up, try different focal lengths on the street to see what I could come up with. But honestly, it was never really my favorite lens. Something about the compression of 200mm is just, it looks a bit funny in the street photography, and yeah, I would sell that lens if I had access to it, and I probably will later. Just kind of elaborating on the topic of the 85mm, there is nothing inherently wrong with the lens itself. It's actually kind of the sweet spot between not being too compressed and getting close to people in street photography. It just doesn't suit my personal style of photography. Every time that I try it, it seems great in theory, but I never end up liking the photos. I've kind of elaborated on this in some of my previous vlog style videos, in the video about Type A street photography, and also another video about Sapporo street photography. You can check those out on my channel as well. So I would say that it's actually a pretty good lens, just doesn't suit my photography. Anyway, on to my other cameras. I want to talk about the Leica M10, which I got about 10 days before the lockdowns began, which means that I didn't really get as much use out of it as I would have hoped. Only recently did I get back to shooting this Leica. I got it with the 50mm f1.4 lens. It's one of the best lenses that I've used ever. Very expensive. The whole system, very expensive. The thing with luxury items though, and the Leica is a luxury item, they tend to retain their value. So if you have the capital to put it into the Leica, you can just park it there, then sell the camera later. You're gonna get a lot of the value back, especially from the lens. From the body, maybe not as much, but from the lens, definitely. Film Leicas tend to even appreciate in value. So in a way, it's a better long-term investment to get a Leica as opposed to a Sony, for example, because Sony keeps putting out new bodies every 6 months basically, which devalues the old bodies a lot faster, and they have none of the prestige. But Leica definitely has people interested in buying, especially their lenses. So in a way, that is a big positive for Leica. Now I must say the M10 body, not the most advanced photography tool I've ever used, kind of in low light, and the battery life is terrible, but it's a very beautiful camera. The way that it feels, the way that it looks, I love using it. Manual focus, taking a while to get used to. I definitely need more practice. I just never really got back to like daily photography ever since the pandemic started. So, but once I get more used to it, it's gonna be, well, I'm gonna get more out of it, I guess, because I'm a little bit slow with the focus still. Now, one thing about this camera, it is a massive attention whore, very noticeable. The silver body cannot be too discreet with this camera, which may be a problem if you're a bit shy or not used to taking photos. After I took a long break in street photography, using this wasn't the easiest choice. Which brings me to Ricoh, which is my third digital camera. Basically, the polar opposite of Leica in terms of noticeability. Very stealthy. It has two purposes for me. Being very stealthy, nobody notices this camera. It doesn't look professional at all. So if you're going to a place where you don't want to be noticed when you're taking photos, bring this one. And it's also it's a smaller camera than my phone, which makes it very easy to just put in the pocket for casual shoots. So it's the perfect combination of being a subtle street photography camera and a very nice casual photography camera that you can always bring with you. And the app works better than with Sony, for example, for transferring photos directly from this to my phone and then editing on Lightroom Mobile. Now there are downsides. There's only one focal length. It's f2.8 at 28mm. Not the best low light camera. Considering the size of this camera though, it is not that bad in low light at all, and the stabilization is very good. So here are a couple of low light photos I have taken with this camera. Then into the film camera bodies that I currently own. This is the Ricoh GR1B. I actually got it before I got the digital Ricoh. I just loved the form factor, so I decided to get the digital as well. And also because I was feeling kind of rusty and I just wanted a really subtle camera that I could always carry with me. Now, when I first got this, I used it a lot. But after I got the digital Ricoh, I just feel like the compact camera is better when it's digital because you can use it more casually. In 2 months, I've still not finished the roll that I've shot since I arrived in Thailand. So I really don't use this as much as I thought. I may sell it later. Another reason why I don't use it that much is because it's apparently very fragile, so I'm trying not to take it out on those really heavy rain situations, or really when it's raining at all. So I kind of protect it, take like 1 or 2 photos a week. But that said, it is a great camera though. It works really well for what it is. I wouldn't say don't buy it. Then if you saw my previous video, you might know this one. It's the Pentax MX. It costs like less than $200 for the camera and the lens, but probably one of my favorite cameras at the moment. It's just a basic film SLR, but I'm getting a lot more into film. It gets the job done reasonably well. You can take double exposures with it. Again, check out the previous video for more about that and my thoughts on film photography in general. In the future, I'm probably gonna get a lot more film cameras because I'm really just getting into film again. So this collection is probably gonna be a lot bigger in a year or so. We'll see. Maybe I'll make another video then. The one more camera I would like to mention is this, the Osmo Pocket. A lot of the B-roll that I shoot is just with this. You attach your phone into it for a bigger screen, and then you get a pocketable gimbal for nice cinematic stable B-roll. It's a really underrated camera because for some reason all the YouTube reviewers think that the GoPro is similar, but it's not at all. Those are completely different cameras. There's a new, bigger, supposedly better Osmo Pocket on the market, the Osmo 2. I think they removed Pocket from the name. I looked at it briefly, but it looked like the autofocus was bad, so I just decided to not get it. This one is good enough for the kind of casual B-roll. It's a camera that you can always put in your bag, weighs nothing. So basically I could just have these two things, not even have a camera bag off with me, put it in the right pocket and the left pocket, and have a full setup for stills and videos with me at all times. You would need a power bank though. The battery in either of these doesn't last a full day, but in theory it's definitely a decent super light setup. Now other stuff that I have a gimbal, the Zhiyun Weebill S, I believe. It's the latest small gimbal that I use with the A7S III. A great gimbal, no complaints. But gimbals are just stabilizers. You don't really need to get the best one, just get one. I have an LED light panel that you can change the color with. Probably gonna get more into lighting because that is something that really allows you to control your shoots a lot more. I've used it for portrait shoots mostly. A really useful tool in any case. Sometimes people ask me if I have diffusion filters, especially recently as they've been getting more and more popular thanks to YouTube marketing campaigns, I guess, which there's nothing wrong with that. I do use a couple, but not that often, because I don't have them for my main lenses, because I keep forgetting to place the orders. But I have one of them for the 24mm lens that I used to basically shoot a couple of YouTube videos with, an occasional B-roll. I rarely use that for stills because the wide-angle lens, I just don't really use the wide-angle for stills. But I do like the effect, a reasonable amount. And then I have one for the 35mm, which I played around with a couple of years ago, but I think the effect for that one is a bit too noticeable, so I kind of stopped using it in most situations. Now it's not that I'm opposed to those filters, it's just I literally forget to buy them. They are definitely good options to kind of spice up your photography. I guess that is all for my current main pieces of equipment. Now in the future, here's a couple of things that I have my eyes on. I wanted an X-Pan, or more like the Fuji version of X-Pan, which is better in the way that it doesn't deteriorate in terms of the paint peeling off like in the original X-Pan. An X-Pan is a panoramic camera. If you shoot film, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. It's a camera that has gone up in value a lot, so it seems to be a decent investment just to get it. Now unfortunately you can't easily find them except on eBay, and eBay keeps declining all of my credit cards for no reason. I can use them everywhere else but not on eBay. But once I solve that problem, I'm probably gonna get an X-Pan. So really I think the lesson of this video is that you only really need one camera, but if you get obsessed with photography, you keep finding any excuses to get as many as you possibly can. Anyway, I think that is all. Do check out my other videos if you're new to the channel, and give me all those positive YouTube signals. I would really appreciate that. If you want to talk to me about the gear, do me a favor and do it in the comment section and not on DMs actually, because that will help my channel. And also like the video if you want to hear more from me. Do the bell notifications thing also, and I hope to see you in the next video.